A violent explosion ripped through a spacecraft nearly 200,000 miles from Earth. A young woman fell from the sky into the Amazon rainforest and lived. A sailor drifted alone across the Atlantic for more than 2 months, surrounded by sharks and endless water. These are not movie plots. They are real survival stories, documented cases where death seemed certain, yet rescue arrived in ways almost nobody could have predicted. And stay close, because one of these survivors was saved by a clue so small most people would have missed it entirely. Another survived a disaster so extreme that experts still struggle to explain it. These true survival stories span space, sea, and land, and every one of them ended with a miraculous rescue. First, space. In April 1970, the crew of Apollo 13 was heading toward the moon when a loud bang shattered the calm of space. An oxygen tank exploded inside the service module. Instantly, alarms lit up. Power dropped. Oxygen leaked away into the darkness. Outside the spacecraft, there was nothing but a freezing vacuum stretching endlessly in every direction. No rescue ships, no emergency landing sites, no chance of outside help. The astronauts were nearly 250,000 miles from Earth. The cabin grew colder. Water became limited. Carbon dioxide levels threatened to rise to deadly levels. Every decision carried enormous consequences. Engineers on Earth raced against time. Using only the materials available on board, they designed an improvised filtration system. The astronauts followed instructions piece by piece, transforming ordinary survive equipment into something that could keep them alive. For 4 agonizing days, the damaged spacecraft limped through space. One mistake could have ended everything. Then, against overwhelming odds, Apollo 13 splashed safely into the Pacific Ocean. What should have become one of history's greatest disasters instead became one of the most remarkable survival stories ever documented. But surviving space is one thing. Surviving a fall from the sky is something else entirely. On Christmas Eve in 1971, 17-year-old Julianne Kepka boarded a flight over Peru. Thunderstorms surrounded the aircraft. Lightning flashed through dark clouds. Turbulence shook the cabin violently. Then disaster struck. Lightning hit the plane. The aircraft broke apart in midair. Julianne was still strapped to her seat when she plunged toward the Amazon rainforest below. The fall lasted thousands of feet. When she regained consciousness, she was alone. Dense jungle stretched in every direction. The air felt heavy and wet. Insects buzzed constantly. The forest floor was tangled with roots, vines, and shadows. She had injuries, limited supplies, and no idea where rescuers might be searching. Drawing on knowledge from her parents, who were biologists, she followed a small stream. She knew water often leads to people. For days, she walked through thick rainforest. Her wounds became infected. Hunger gnawed at her. Every sound in the jungle carried uncertainty. Then she discovered a small boat and nearby shelter used by local workers. Eventually, rescuers found her. Out of 92 people aboard the aircraft, Juliana was the sole survivor. And the next story proves that sometimes survival depends on a decision made in a single, desperate moment. In 2003, experienced outdoorsman Aaron Ralston was hiking alone through a remote canyon in Utah. Without warning, a massive boulder shifted. His right arm became pinned against the canyon wall. The rock weighed hundreds of pounds. Hours passed, then days. The desert sun baked the narrow canyon during daylight. Nights brought chilling cold. Water supplies shrank rapidly. Rescue was unlikely because nobody knew exactly where he was. Ralston tried everything. He attempted to break the rock. He searched for leverage. Nothing worked. 5 days later, facing certain death, he made an unthinkable decision. Using a small multi-tool, he freed himself and began hiking out of the canyon. Weak, dehydrated, and bleeding, he stumbled through the desert until he encountered other hikers who alerted authorities. His rescue became one of the most extraordinary documented survival stories ever recorded. Now for the ocean. In January 1982, sailor Stephen Callahan set out alone across the Atlantic. During the voyage, his boat collided with an object and began sinking. Within minutes, he was forced into a small inflatable life raft. The ocean swallowed his vessel. Everything changed. The sea became his entire world. Day after day, waves rose and fell beneath him. Salt coated his skin. The blazing sun scorched him during daylight. At night, darkness stretched across the horizon with no sign of rescue. Food was scarce. Fresh water required constant effort to collect. Sharks frequently circled below the raft. 76 days passed. Think about that. More than 2 months alone in open ocean. His body weakened dramatically, but he refused to surrender. Eventually, fishermen spotted his raft near the Caribbean and brought him to safety. 76 days adrift, yet somehow he survived. And remember that clue I mentioned earlier? It appears in our next story. In 1915, explorer Ernest Shackleton and his crew faced catastrophe when their ship Endurance became trapped in Antarctic ice. The pressure of the frozen sea crushed the vessel. The crew abandoned ship. Around them stretched a world of ice, wind, and unimaginable cold. Temperatures plunged far below freezing. Snow blasted across the landscape. Survival itself seemed impossible. For months, the men camped on drifting ice. Eventually, they launched lifeboats and navigated treacherous seas toward remote islands. Then, Shackleton made a daring journey across hundreds of miles of some of the roughest ocean on Earth. After reaching help, he organized a rescue mission. Every single member of the stranded crew survived. The tiny clue? Hope. Not a physical object, but a relentless refusal to accept defeat. Shackleton's leadership kept people moving when despair could have ended everything. Our final story combines darkness, rising water, and one of the most complex rescues ever attempted. In 2018, 12 boys and their coach entered a cave system in Thailand after soccer practice. Heavy rains flooded the passages behind them. The group became trapped deep underground. Days passed. Families waited anxiously. Search teams battled muddy water, narrow tunnels, and complete darkness. Inside the cave, the trapped group sat in cold conditions with limited food. Oxygen levels gradually declined. The rescue operation grew into a massive international effort, involving divers from multiple countries. Then, after an exhausting search, divers discovered the group alive. But finding them was only the beginning. Getting them out required navigating flooded tunnels that challenged even expert cave divers. One by one, the boys were brought through the darkness and returned safely to the surface. Against staggering odds, all 13 survived. What connects these stories? An exploding spacecraft, a rainforest freefall, a desert canyon, a drifting life raft, Antarctic ice, a flooded cave. Different environments, different dangers, yet every one of these true survival stories shares the same pattern. The moment when everything looked hopeless was not the end. Human beings have endured freezing oceans, crushing isolation, devastating accidents, and impossible odds. Again and again, survival came down to persistence, ingenuity, teamwork, and sometimes a little luck arriving at exactly the right moment. The next time life feels overwhelming, remember these documented survival stories from space, sea, and land. Real people stood face to face with situations that seemed unsurvivable. Their worlds collapsed around them. Rescue appeared impossibly distant, and yet they kept going long enough for the impossible to happen. Sometimes the difference between tragedy and a miraculous rescue is one more hour, one more step, one more decision not to give up.
Almost gone.